So I should be live on Facebook now. So welcome everybody who's joined me live, or welcome to those people who catch up with me later. Today's topic is probably pretty weird, really. I quite often have people asking me about, there's something wrong with my child, you know, what can I do about it? And so I've tried to gather together today some of the weird symptoms I find, and the answer is always to try and help the student be more grounded. My name is Olive Hickmott, and I'm a forensic learning coach, and I spend my life working out why somebody's doing something. I'm not really interested in the behavior they display. I'm much more interested in why are they doing it. Last week I did 2 classes on being grounded, and those you can find on YouTube, and you can also find 4 extra short videos I put up of preparing to shift your energy, releasing blocks, grounding yourself, and grounding the environment. Whilst you were there, you might also like to have a look at the sleeping one that I've done this morning, which will be up in the next couple of hours. So this section is about connecting the dots for some of the weird things that people experience, and they don't notice why it's connected to grounding. I've used grounding and been very successful with all of these. So I don't expect them to be a perfect solution, but I do think they significantly contribute to the problems that people are having. So here are some of the symptoms I get asked about. And in no particular order, because I really can't find a really good logical order to put around these. Students may have good and bad days. That's one of the most obvious ones when you're grounded and when you're not. They may have a racing mind and zoning out. They may do headbanging. They may have an obsession with one toy. They may be clumsy. Struggling to ride a bike is a usual one. Lack of logical thinking, so their internal dialogue is missing. Because they're in fight and flight and they're ungrounded, then they really aren't thinking very logically. And if you want to talk to them about their behavior afterwards, they've probably forgotten all about it anyway. They may be talking very rapidly. The faster people talk, normally the more ungrounded they are. And pardon me if I do that from time to time. That used to be a really good habit of mine. They can even be deaf. That one's extraordinary. They can run into the road, as people often know. Their small child can run into the road. They may not be able to poo very well, which is a slightly bizarre one. They can't be touched, and they dislike clothes, so their whole sensory system for touch is not great. They might even start injuring themselves, and they've got a poor memory for what's been going on when they're ungrounded, and they might have some allergies, and they may have dreams that are upsetting them. So there's quite a lot to be working on there, one way and another. So I tried to group these into categories, but I really struggled because they're all pretty unique. Deafness. Last week I talked about children who heard higher frequencies than most people. There are also people who can't hear normal frequencies. So it's like as if normal frequencies go from A to B, then somebody else's, when you're ungrounded, frequencies go from C to D. I worked with a woman in Holland that I remember who had 2 hearing aids, and she was a bit of a challenge to get grounded for one reason or another, but we got her grounded in about 15 minutes, something like that, and she literally took out her 2 hearing aids, threw them across the table at me, and she said, "Now I can hear." And she had been like this for years. Mental imagery. If you're ungrounded, you either can't see mental images, or you've got them so scrambled that you don't know what they are. I had one lad once who kept doing this when I asked him to visualize anything, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "All I can see is dots, miss." And I went, okay, got him more grounded, and his pictures started appearing. And it was like that, you know, the television set when well, I don't know if they do now, but in the old days, when you switched your television set on, it had come up with black and white dots everywhere. Now it's probably different, it's high tech now, but that's what he was seeing. It was like it was missing the channel. Very common one with autistic children is can't be touched, can't be soothed, can't be comforted. That is definitely grounding. I went through a period of my life when I slept really ungrounded, and I couldn't bear to be touched. And it would literally, it felt like an electric shock. It was horrible. And so I'm not surprised at all children can't bear to be touched, can't bear to be soothed and comforted. And they can dislike clothes because they've got labels in them or something that's winding up their autonomic nervous system. Too much information, I've talked about before, but just with respect to grounding, if you've got an obsession with one toy, if a child's doing, studying one toy like this, very close, then what they're doing is they're reducing the peripheral vision. And the peripheral vision is huge because they're ungrounded. Head banging. If you've got all this going on in your head, it doesn't surprise me at all that children start head banging. And they won't want to look at you in your eyes because they are struggling with too much information when they're ungrounded. And so they want to do everything they possibly can to reduce that information. Let's just have a quick look at safety. When you're very ungrounded, I probably said this before, but I'll do it again, is that we have 3 eye positions. When we're looking down, we're in our emotions or internal dialogue. When we're looking forwards, we're auditory, and one way we're listening and one way we're speaking. When we're looking up, we're in visual. You'll see my eyes go up all the time, which I'm not even conscious of most of the time. If you're ungrounded, what happens is the internal dialogue gets lost, the auditory becomes really odd, and the visual becomes super visual. And so you don't do things. The internal dialogue is about keeping you safe. And for example, if you go to run across the road, you've got some form of internal dialogue in your head going, don't run now, you're going to get knocked over, or something like that, or a feeling that you shouldn't be going across the road. And so you get parents saying, this child's got no common sense. It's because they've got no internal dialogue because they're so ungrounded. Talks incessantly on favourite topic because they've got no internal dialogue that says, I think you've said enough. I think you should just slow down for a minute. Let the other person get a word in. And sometimes we've even had kids who do a funny voice. I remember one lad who was about 8 who every time he came out of school, he spoke in Mickey Mouse. And it was because he was so ungrounded. And by the time he got home and got more grounded and more calmed down because his day at work, his day at school was really stressful, he was actually back to speaking in a normal voice. Self-injury, again, that's a sort of mixture of no internal dialogue to say don't do it, and actually the pain sometimes will actually get people grounded. There's a lovely story about a lad who was, I can't remember the name of the book now, who was he was having a meltdown basically. He went in the cupboard and threw all the clothes on top of himself to try, which Mum didn't know, but that was him trying to get grounded. And then eventually he passed out. And so they manhandled him into the car to take him to the hospital. And what happened was it was very cold outside. And so he got back in his body and suddenly woke up. So he's actually completely dozed off in being so ungrounded. Allergies is a fun thing. That if you're ungrounded, it's difficult for the body to know what is me and what is not me. And allergies all run on what is me and what is not me. So if you get a thorn in your finger, your body is saying, that's not me, I'm going to get rid of it. So I marshal all the troops to get rid of it. But if you're not in your body, then it's not going to be very successful. Whenever I take, because I haven't got small children anymore taking them for injections, whenever I take the dogs for an injection, I always make sure they're really grounded and really relaxed. It's because if you're having a vaccination, the most important thing for the vaccination to your body to do is that me or is it not me? So eye accessing cues is really useful for that, to see where a child's eyes are going. Balance and elimination, this is quite funny. I've been asked this a few times and I've responded to this on Facebook, and I think people think I'm mad. Have you ever tried going to the toilet when you're in an aeroplane 35,000 feet in the air? It's not easy. You normally have to wait rather a long time. And that's exactly what children are doing. If they're ungrounded and they're trying to go to the toilet, it can be really difficult. When you're trying to ride a bike and you're ungrounded, I always say it's a bit like driving a bus while sitting on the roof. You want to be sitting in the driver's seat, not sitting on the roof. They normally have got cold hands and feet. And a friend of one of my practitioners has done this so many times, it's unbelievable. When somebody has had trouble with a small child not being able to poo, which is very dangerous for a small child, they've warmed up their hands and feet because they're normally quite cold, and that encourages them to get back on the planet. And she's done that so many times and it's had this desired effect. Okay, so the next one is your brain's in overdrive, which is when you talk fast. You can get hyperactive, and you can do what I do sometimes if I get ungrounded is I'm talking, and you'll probably have noticed this, I can interrupt myself because my brain is going so fast I've moved on to the next thing. And it's much worse when you're ungrounded. Meltdown's exactly the same thing. The kids have got no idea what's going on when they're doing a meltdown, and they can't remember it, so it's no good talking to them about it because they've been completely out of their body. And so they can do, because they're not using the front part of their brain where all the logic happens, they can be, and they can't remember what's happened, then you can't even discuss it with them, which is a real drawback, because most parents want to discuss, 5 minutes later, want to discuss what the child's been doing, and the child really hasn't got a clue. I have one child who used to run up and down stairs when he was getting close to a meltdown, which is really dangerous. I may have mentioned that one last week. And luckily, at the bottom of the stairs, he had the downstairs toilet. And I used to recommend that instead of running up and down the stairs, he went and sat on the downstairs toilet. And because the downstairs toilet is really grounding, he would get back in his body, and he kept a book in there, and he didn't have to use the toilet, just sitting on it enabled him to access the earth more easily. And of course, they have good and bad days. Some of that's caused by whether they manage to sleep properly, whether they manage to sleep grounded, or whether they are managing to be grounded on that day. So some days you will hear parents and teachers say, oh, well, today they've been absolutely fine, but yesterday they were awful. And it's all to do with whether they're grounded. And of course, lack of oxygenation in the brain will get them hyper. So that was a very quick run through of the, and you'll find lots of this, by the way, in the elephants in the classroom. There are so many more, I couldn't remember any more, but there was so many more when people come to me and say, why is a child doing this? And I go, it's not grounded. And then, of course, we have to teach them how to get grounded, which is the right place to be when you're trying to learn or do anything. But parents will, unfortunately, sort of relate that to being sent to your bedroom or something like that, which is clearly not what I'm talking about. And if you want to know more about grounding, I did 2 classes last week on grounding. I think I'm zoned out on grounding now. So I'm going to stop this on live streaming, if I can manage to do it. So thank you all very much for joining me, and I will get back to the people on Zoom.